Hello folks, Y Guy here again, and this video is called the Y Guy Prodigal. I want to welcome you to my home on this beautiful spring April morning, and even though it's April, we have mayflies buzzing all around me. So if you see me swatting a few, I tried doing this video just a little bit earlier and I ended up swallowing a mayfly right in the middle of doing a video, so I had to retake it. Anyway, this video is called the Y Guy Prodigal. And for those who believe like I do, that God will have all to be saved, as it says in 1 Timothy 2:4, or all will know God, Hebrews 8:11, or all flesh will come to God, Psalm 65:2, or salvation of all is testified in due time, 1 Timothy 2:6, or Jesus came to save all, John 12:47, or all reconciled unto God, Colossians 1:20, and there's over 100 more. Just like that, they say the same thing, and none of these verses mentions anything in context, anything about only if you repent, only if you believe, only if you do all those things that you do, okay, that they claim that you must do. That nothing like that is in any of these verses, all right? There are no conditions. It's a blanket statement over hundreds of times. So that needs to be considered. However, okay, for you people who choose to ignore these passages, usually what you say in response to these passages is, you mean to say people can live in a sinful lifestyle and do whatever they want and get away with it? And then they always follow up with, why should we even share the gospel if God's going to save everyone in the end? I'd like to address those questions just a little bit. I'm keeping this video very short, okay? So I'm just going to be scratching the surface here. First, I want to ask you who believe that way, or who have that response, I should say, as how many things have you gotten away with? Okay? Usually the answer is, but I don't practice living in sin. Well, that self-righteous statement alone proves otherwise, because folks who do that, or that practice of self-righteousness, they live in that. And that's every bit as, okay, you understand, you get it, okay? By what standard, here's the question, by what standard do we use to determine when somebody crosses that line in God's sand where he just simply can't endure anymore, and he sentences one to an eternity of torture? By what standard do we use? Okay, there are so many standards out there. That's the problem, is we each have our own standard who believe that way. I shouldn't say we, but those who believe that way have their own standard. And I guarantee God's love has little or nothing to do with it, with that standard. That's huge. That's something else to really consider. The names that are always thrown out when we talk about all to be saved, the names are thrown out there are Hitler, bin Laden, responsible for thousands, if not millions, of deaths of innocents. Well, let's not forget King David, too. This guy, the reason he wasn't allowed to build the temple unto God is because it says he had the blood of innocents on his hands. Who knows how many thousands, if not 10,000s of people that he was responsible for killing. Plus also the people we vote for in office, how many innocents do they kill? And I realize that might be stretching it slightly, but we do have some responsibility there. The point is, this world has a way of paying the price. We end up paying the price anyway. It's not like we get away with very much at all. But I want to hit on that a little bit later. I ask for those who choose to ignore the verses that I mentioned and run with a sinful lifestyle. I ask you to give me and people like me a biblical example of someone specific. Give me anybody, anyone specifically who was accused of living in that sinful lifestyle. Okay? Unrepented, unbelieving, everything, and died and ended up spending eternity in hell. Give me somebody. An example of that. If it's so important, if countless billions are going to be there, do you think that maybe even be just one person where that happened to him as an example, as a precedence for the rest of us? You see, it doesn't exist anywhere in the Bible. Nowhere. And religiously ignorant people, I already know the first thoughts come into a lot of people's mind when they view this as, but there's Lazarus and the rich man. When I say ignorant, I'm talking about lack of knowledge. It's not a put down, okay? The religiously ignorant will always use that one. Now here's the problem. What kind of sinful lifestyle was the rich man living in that deserved an eternity in hell? Number one. Number two is, if you watch my video called The Lazarus and the Rich Dude, why Guy asked who is the Lazarus and the rich dude, the word hell is a horrible mistranslation. The Latins put that in there, okay, when they printed the Latin Vulgate in 440 AD, or AD 440. The correct word in the Greek was called unseen. That was the correct word that was used in there. That's first. That's a very important issue. Also, the word eternity was never mentioned. So for this man's lifestyle of just not being kind, this rich man's lifestyle of not being kind to Lazarus, he's supposed to spend an eternity in hell. I mean, see, there's too many holes in that. And that brings me to another point, is that the law enforcement uses a term called, a phrase, that if you do the crime, you got to pay the time or do the time. Well, so basically, what people who ignore these verses are saying is that, well, if you live in this sinful lifestyle just for a lifetime, a short lifetime, the payment for that is spending an eternity being tormented and tortured. Are you telling me that law enforcement and the man's justice is more merciful and graceful, I should say, than God's? Because that's what you're saying. And what's even more disgusting to me now, and I used to be in your camp, okay, so I understand, I relate, but what disgusts me even more now is people will say, well, it's not the sinful lifestyle that they're living that puts them in hell, it's their unbelief. Oh my gosh, that sounds even worse. Somebody's unbelief is a justification for somebody spending eternity being tormented and tortured? Who cares about killing all these millions of people? I mean, I'm just being sarcastic, but just unbelief is what does it. All the murders that you've committed and all the sinful lifestyle, that's nothing compared to unbelief. I hope you hear yourself when you say these things. You need to rethink them, all right? Just the opposite is shared in the Bible. Everyone's heard the parable of the prodigal son. And yet, what's usually used by these people, they'll say, but he repented. He came back. He asked forgiveness. He said he was sorry. All of those things are putting it all on him. And yet, if you read that passage, you'll discover that father ignored him. He didn't require it. He didn't request it. Didn't demand it. Didn't even acknowledge that prodigal son even said any of those things. Nothing was even acknowledged. So it sure appeared on the surface he sure got away with it. But God knows that he didn't. Because this life has a way of dishing out payment for what we do. Okay, in of itself. This life is just that way. And God knows that. So he didn't get away with it. And none of us do. None of us do. This life is hard. So consider that. The second question I want to address in closing here on this video is, why should we even share the gospel if God's going to save everyone in the end? Folks, is your life any better, even a little bit, since God is in your life and you're walking and talking? And are you at all any more joyful, any more confident, have any more peace? Do you have any of those things? If that isn't reason enough, you need to rethink it. Having a relationship, having a living relationship with a living God is by far better than living a lifestyle of sin or unbelief. I mean, they're opposites, polar opposites. So of course there's a darn good reason. It has nothing to do with heaven or hell or any of that. It's called relationship. See, God doesn't. All these verses doesn't mention heaven or hell. God didn't come to save us from a place called hell. He came to save us to have a relationship, a living relationship with himself. Just like that father did for the prodigal son. He wanted his son. He wanted to hug him. He wanted to run out and grab him and hug him and love on him. Okay? That's what it's all about, folks. Well, thank you for viewing this video, and I appreciate your time. Have a good day.